Star Wars Santa here. It's 217 days until Christmas 2020, and today marks the 40th anniversary of the release of the Empire Strikes Back. And I thought we'd just spend some time together talking a little bit about Empire Strikes Back. And it's been a while since I've been online. We moved the office, and Santa's now working out of the cabin here. We've got the fire going, the snow's coming down at the North Pole, and we've spent some time this afternoon just talking about Star Wars. So it's a good day today, and so I thought, well, we watched Empire Strikes Back earlier today on Disney Plus, and just took some notes. One of the earlier times I watched it, and thought I'd walk down these notes. We may have a guest join us. We might have a magic maker from Reimagining Star Wars join us in a little bit. But for now, we'll just go through some of my notes. And of course, Empire Strikes Back opens with those probes being sent out across the galaxy, and Luke sees one crash. So of course, he's on Hoth, and he's on his Tauntaun, and he sees that one crash, and there's Han is scurrying about, getting ready to leave, and he and Chewie are preparing the Falcon to return back to pay Jabba what he owes him, and there's an interaction there with Han and Leia as she wants him to stay, and he's got to go back to pay, and then we get to a point where it flashes back to Luke, and Luke's hanging in the cave, and he wakes up. He's been injured by the snow beast there that's got him, and then he is with the Wampa. He wakes up and he sees his lightsaber, and he reaches out with the Force and pulls it to him. Now I remember at the time that was a brand new Force ability, so. I was just a kid when Empire Strikes Back came out at the theaters, and back then, the only way you could see a new movie release, or a movie release at all, was in the theaters. We didn't have VHS, and we didn't have Blu-rays and DVDs and streaming services. So I saw Empire Strikes Back as a boy. I was about 12 years old, and saw that in the theaters. And I remember when he reached out to get that, we'd never seen a force pull like that, and that was a new ability. It was fun to see that. And then, of course, he frees himself just in the nick of time and whacks off that Wampa's arm. And I wondered, to me, the last time I watched it, because I was trying to think of the things a little more critically. I just love Empire Strikes Back, and I wanted to look at it with new eyes and try to look at it a little bit critically. And it seems to me that if Luke wanted to, he just whacked off that Wampa's arm. He could have just killed the Wampa and stayed in the cave and had some protection from the elements that were outside. We see him go out into the elements, and he's struggling, and he's freezing to death. He falls down in the snow, and he has that vision of Obi-Wan, right? And Obi-Wan tells him, Luke, go to the Dagobah system and find Yoda. He's the Jedi Master I studied with, and or who instructed me. And so Luke's out there. He wanders, and he falls down. But had he sensed the need, I don't understand why he may not have just gone back into the cave, gone out and said, okay, this is not going to be doable. Go back in the cave, kill the Wampa. You've got some protection. The Wampa had a little fire there anyway, and he could have stayed the night and then come out the next day when it was safer. And of course, he doesn't. He's out there, and Han finds him. And Han finds him just as his Wampa is running out of energy, and it dies. Han pulls Luke in one of the best scenes we have, one of the best quotes we have. Han takes that lightsaber and slices open the Wampa, and then says, "I thought they smelled bad on the outside," right? And he puts Luke in that Wampa to survive the night. So he and Luke crawl into the carcass, and that's how they are able to survive the extreme weather. Again, it would have made more sense to been in the cave, but we get one of the great scenes from Star Wars, from all Star Wars, and then we get that great line that's a meme, and it's fantastic. So there's that, and then the probe, of course, comes, and they find the Empire. Darth Vader sees the image that comes back, and he can see the force, the shield generators, and he knows that's where they are. And so the Empire goes out to get them, and in that process, Han and Luke, they know already, hey, they probably found us. We need to hurry up and get out of here. And as they're leaving, and they're preparing all the ships, of course, the destroyers arrive. And another interesting thing, and this becomes really interesting because of seeing the Clone Wars. They use those ion cannons. And if you remember back in the Clone Wars animated series, General Grievous had the ion projectors on his ship. And they would project out those ion blasts to disable everything, which came before, of course, the Empire Strikes Back. And the ion blasts that came from Grievous's ship were those round circles that grew and they went out through space. Well, in this case, we've got the ion that comes out in a blast, right? And it hits those Star Destroyers so that the ships can escape into space. So that's effective, right? They disable that Star Destroyer. And then a question again, because I was looking at it with a bit of a critical eye, I wondered, well, why didn't they just shoot the AT-ATs with them, right? The AT-AT walkers, they could have shot those with the ion cannons, and they wouldn't have had them blowing up the shield generators, and they could have protected themselves from the Star Destroyers in space. So another question, why didn't they just shoot those with the ion blasters? It seems that they were able to charge those and fire them without a long delay. It would have been at least a strategy to slow that approach. So in any event, things happen, and Han, Leia, Chewie, and C-3PO escape on the Falcon just as Darth Vader's there, and the troopers are setting up to fire on the Falcon. They escape last minute. Luke and R2 leave on his X-wing, and they go to Dagobah. And as the Falcon's escaping, another point, again, just looking at it with a critical eye, as the Falcon's escaping, these two Star Destroyers crash into each other in space. And it really begs the question why the navigators, you've got a whole crew who's supposedly trained and capable navigating these giant vessels, and they crash them into each other in space. And that's not necessarily something that makes a lot of sense in retrospect, but it's fun. The Falcon, of course, escapes, and they go into the asteroid belt, and Vader instructs the destroyer to follow him into there, and you've got the TIEs following him in. There's some fantastic flying by Han Solo, and he's able to eventually land it on that asteroid. And apparently the asteroid has its own gravitational field, which again is a little bit interesting, because if it had its own gravitational field, and we see that because when they get out later, they get out of the Falcon and they're walking around, they're not floating around, right? They're walking on what would appear to be some gravitational surface. And not only that, but they don't have a lot of protection against the vacuum of space, or that coldness of space. So apparently it's got its own sort of inner energy. And if that's the case, then all those little asteroids that were floating around it, why didn't they crash into that asteroid as well, just from the gravitational pull? So lots of head scratchers if you're trying to look at it from the perspective of how actually science works and this. And we know Star Wars is a space fantasy, and it's not ever intended to be science driven. There's certainly some pieces of it that hold to relative positions that we can understand, but for people that want to get caught up on these little pieces of minutia, they've always existed in Star Wars, and that's been my point all along. And if you get caught up on those in, let's say, the sequel trilogy, why bombs fall in space and why all these other things happen in the sequel trilogy, I would just ask you to, keep a little more open mind on it, and just enjoy them for what they are. Right? It's a space fantasy, and have fun. They're great stories, and certainly Empire, the Empire Strikes Back is a fan favorite, and even it has some questions that people can legitimately raise. So the Falcon's on there, and we see then Luke taking R2 and Luke taking the X-wing to Dagobah, and again, the Clone Wars in season 6, we see R2 and Yoda go to Dagobah. Yoda has R2 fly his X-wing to Dagobah, and they land there. And when we get in Empire Strikes Back, Luke and R2 land on Dagobah. R2's a little nervous, and Luke even kind of says, "Oh, you'll be fine." And when he crashes on the surface, R2 that's when R2's like, "Is it going to be safe?" Well, R2's already been to Dagobah. R2's already, kind of trolled around on Dagobah, and then as they're doing that, Yoda appears, and R2 already knows Yoda and Dagobah. He's been there with Yoda. And at the time, R2 acts as if he doesn't know who Yoda is, and they have that exchange where R2's trying to take things back, and Yoda's whacking him, mine, mine, mine. It's fun. Again, if you're trying to look at the canon and you're trying to tie everything really neatly and closely together, these little kind of inconsistencies can become issues, and then you've got to try to figure out retroactively, right, how to put them in some sort of context. That's called retcon, right? Retroactive context, and we're forced to do that because of the content that we got from the Clone Wars and the prequels. They kind of step on it from time to time, and it raises another point as I bring up the prequels. Here's one of the scenes where R2's thrusters sure would have been handy. They crash in the swamp in the bog there, and rather than R2 being able to use these thrusters to raise up and fly over to the surface, he goes into the water. He falls into the water and then uses that periscope, and they go through there and get to the surface. So again, a retcon. Where did the thrusters go? And there's all kinds of explanations out there. People theorize about it. My favorite is that the Jawas took it when they landed on Tatooine in A New Hope, but who knows? So we get there. Vader is upset. He takes care of one of the admirals and promotes a captain to admiral, and has them go into the asteroid field after the Falcon, and again, I mentioned Yoda being silly with Luke, acting as if he's some minor creature, and that he's not the Jedi Master that he is, and that actually plays out, I think, fairly well in the story. Then later we get Luke going into Yoda's home, but he leaves R2 outside in the rain, and you don't understand. I mean, Yoda knows R2, and Luke has R2 there. Why not bring him inside? And R2's kind of tilting and looking up to look inside, but they leave him outside. And Luke gets frustrated. He's kind of single-minded, looking for Yoda, and Yoda's not revealed himself. He gets frustrated, and of course he gets angry, and uh, Yoda then tells Obi-Wan, I can't teach this kid, right? And Yoda says, oh, wasn't I like, or Obi-Wan says, oh, I was like that when I was younger too. And Luke hears that and realizes, oh no, this is Yoda. And they have that exchange, and Luke promises, oh, I'm teachable. I'll do what you want. You're, the Jedi Master. And I bring that up because it doesn't take Luke long to decide that he knows better than Yoda, and he's not going to do what Yoda says anyway. And that, and I like to talk about that just a little bit more when we get there. But so they go. Luke begins his training, right? And he gets to the point where he's going to go into the dark side cave, and Yoda tells him, "Don't take your weapons." And this is what I was talking about just now, right? He's already told Yoda, "Hey, I'm teachable. I'll do what you want. I'll put in the hard work. I'm your guy." And here Yoda says, "Don't wear your weapons. Put them down." And Luke says, no, I know you told me not to, but I'm going to anyway. Luke doesn't even know what's down there. Luke has just been told he's here for a test. It's another part of his training, but he's disobedient to Yoda. And for me personally, as a kid growing up, it was always an issue that I had with Luke is he was irreverent toward Yoda and and disobedient in his training. And here's a guy that should be learning. He should be getting the strongest that he can so that he can go meet the most terrifying villain in all the universe that he knows at the time through Vader. Of course, Palpatine's still out there, but he's not even willing to do what's necessary or what his Jedi Master is instructed him to do, and he decides to go in that cave with his weapon anyway. It works out. He has the encounter with Vader, sees himself in Vader's face, and all of that when he chops off the mask. And I remember being really confused. First of all, scared when I was a kid and I saw this the first time. I remember being really scared when Vader appeared down there with his lightsaber. It's like, holy moly! It's a good thing he took that lightsaber with him, or he'd be in a big trouble. But we know now that that's a vision that he had. It was part of a test that he had, and he was meeting the thing that he feared most, and of course that was Vader in that context. Meanwhile, back in the asteroid belt, and Han and Chewie are trying to repair the Falcon so they can jump, and Leia gets startled by the Minox landing on the hull, and of course then Han goes out to explore it, and Leia goes out and Chewie, and that's where they figure out, uh-oh, this is not just a cave, right? This is the home of a being, a monster to some degree, and they scurry back into the Falcon, and they take off just as it's closing, and escape right through the teeth as it comes up out of the cave. That's a fantastic scene, one that's all Star Wars fans remember, and they're flying to get to, of course, Cloud City, and we have a little bit of an issue because we know that they still don't have their hyperdrive, and when people start trying to track these things, they're trying to figure out, well, how long did it take Han and Leia and Chewie to get from Hoth to Cloud City? Meanwhile, Luke and R2 took a hyperdrive in the X-Wing to get to Dagobah. He's been training there, and then he uses X-Wing later to get to Cloud City. And those timelines, how do they line up? How long did it take? there's all kinds of different fan theories out there. You can look them up, and a lot of them make sense, but it's also been a point of contention among fans to say that these timelines don't seem to line up correctly. And then again, like if you want to get caught up in the science of it, you get into the theory of relativity and traveling faster than light speed and aging and so on and so forth. None of this makes any sense because people don't age correctly with traveling faster than the speed of light. And yeah, it's just not worth it, right? Remember, it's a space fantasy. We just have fun. It's a great story. We love the characters. We love the story. And if you're trying to make everything make perfect sense by applying laws of physics or science to things, or even internal consistency within the storyline, it doesn't add up. And that goes all the way back to the original trilogy. And I'll get to another point here in a minute that brings that up as well. And so anyway, the Falcon goes and it gets attached to a backside of a destroyer. And as the destroyer's getting ready to jump into hyperspace, it's common procedure for them to dump their trash in space. And so they dump their trash, and Han releases the Falcon to kind of float listlessly with the debris, and the destroyer jumps off, and they've escaped. And but what we see the Slave 2 there, we know that Boba Fett is onto him. And ultimately, it's Boba Fett that then reports back to the Empire and to Vader where Han, Leia, and Chewie went. Right? He follows them to Cloud City and reports it, and he learns where they're going, and of course Vader gets there first. And so we go back to Luke again, training with Yoda, and Yoda tells Luke. I wrote down some of these quotes because Luke is complaining about the Force not being able to do things. There's a scene where Yoda's instructing Luke, and Luke replies, "It's impossible, right? What you ask, it's impossible. It can't be done." And Yoda's just exasperated, kind of, and he tells Luke, "Always with you, it cannot be done, right? You must unlearn, do or do not. There is no try." That's the quote everybody remembers, but in the context of it, it's interesting as well. And go back to my complaint about Luke before, right? Never listening, never learning. And here Yoda's telling him the same thing. Always with you, it can't be done. You have to unlearn what you think you know. You're headstrong, you're stubborn. All those things I told Obi-Wan and why you shouldn't be trained, yeah, that's you, buddy. And of course, Luke's still just a problem. So and then it goes on, and one of my favorite quotes from Yoda, he tells him, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." And that's when Luke says, "You want the impossible." And Luke says, and so then Yoda raises the X-wing out of the marsh, floats it across, lands it on the surface, and Luke says, "I can't believe it." Here he just saw it. So first, Yoda tells him that it's the Force, right? It binds us, it connects, and it's a powerful ally. And Luke says, "Oh, it's impossible." And then of course Yoda does it. He watches him do it, and Luke responds immediately, "I can't believe it." And Yoda says, "That's why you fail." So we've got a irreverent student who's not doing what he's supposed to do. He's not listening. He's not obeying. He's not learning, and yet when it comes time, he decides to go save Han and Leia. We'll touch on that here in a second. But so Han arrives at Cloud City, and they go visit Lando, and Luke senses it, and this is where we get Han and Lando do that embrace, and Leia learns that they're friends, and that's where he got the Falcon, and they're visiting there, and C-3PO sees something, hears something, he gets diverted to the side, and then he gets shot, right, and he gets pulled aside and pulled inside. Later, that's when Chewie finds, he goes looking for C-3PO and finds his parts all scattered about, and has to fight to get them back from being scrapped, and gathers them all together to reassemble 3PO. And as this is happening, Luke is sensing there's a problem on Cloud City. And he doesn't know it's Cloud City. He just says, I had a vision. I saw a city in the clouds. And my friends, they're in danger. And Yoda tells him, be careful, right? You shouldn't jump on this. We don't know for sure. And Obi-Wan even says to Luke, hey, you can't know that this is going to happen, right? Luke says, my friends, they'll die. And Obi-Wan tells him, look, even Yoda doesn't know that. You can't pretend to know that you know that they're going to die. He said, well, at least I can help them. And they tell him, well, not if you don't finish your training, you can't. You're going to go there and you're going to undo everything that they've worked for. All the sacrifice, all the hard work that people put in, the risk and the death, everything that's happened. You're going to undo all of it if you leave here without finishing your training. And Luke tries to abide by it, but then eventually he just says, nope, I'm going to go anyway. So here we get again the irreverent, disobedient student, and it's one of the reasons I never really connected, me personally, never connected that well with Luke Skywalker. The kid was headstrong, disobedient, and didn't finish his training. He was constantly doing things that he was told were not beneficial. Now it kind of worked out for him, but he didn't know that. And when he goes, I was frustrated at the time. I remember as a kid thinking, what an idiot, right? What an idiot this kid is. What's his problem? He needs to do what Yoda and Obi-Wan are telling him to do. But he didn't. And so he goes on, and Chewie gets 3PO's pieces, and Vader intercepts them at the dining hall. And this is fun. We had fun on Fanjaxer in a chat the other day about this, because when they arrive there, and that door opens and Darth Vader's standing in there, the first thing Han does is he raises his weapon, he starts shooting, right? And then Vader intercepts, he just deflects the blaster bolts, pulls the weapon. But in that scene, you look in that dining hall, the table is set with food. It's got plates and dinnerware, and Vader says, join us, won't you? And that's when Boba Fett steps out. And so he and Boba Fett are standing there, and the door's shut, and the scene ends. So the question is, did they actually sit down and have dinner together? Did they enjoy a meal? Is this Leia's one and only meal she had with her dad? Right, like this, what's going on? And of course, at this point, Vader doesn't even sense that Leia is his daughter. Leia doesn't know that he's her father. And I want to take this moment just to break, because in A New Hope, Obi-Wan refers to Vader in a sense that he killed his father. And if you read the early scripts of Empire Strikes Back, you'll see that when Obi-Wan and Yoda are talking to Luke, that scene originally was Anakin coming to talk to Luke. Anakin is a Force ghost, comes and talks to Luke and tells him how proud he is, and they have this conversation. And he tells him that he has a sister, and his sister has an entirely different name, right? And it's not Leia. And so at the time when Empire was being written, they didn't yet have identified that Leia was Luke's sister. When that movie was filmed, it wasn't, and that's why you get the kissing scene at the beginning when she lip locks with Luke, because her and Han are having this little argument, and Han's getting her goat, and so she goes and she plants one on Luke, and that's a great scene because Chewie laughs at him, and laugh it up, fuzzball, and they have that great interaction. But when that movie was written, when that movie was produced, the thought was not that Luke and Leia were brother and sister at that time. That didn't happen until the Return of the Jedi. So Empire Strikes Back, they're not brother or sister, and that's why that kiss scene happens the way that it does. And in the original script, Luke's sister had an entirely different name, and when you read it, you can see that. There's Anakin and Vader were not the same person. Anakin, Luke's father, tells him about Vader, and that's why also when A New Hope, when Obi-Wan sees Vader, he calls him Darth, like Darth is his first name, not a title, because at the time that wasn't the case, right? His name was Darth, and his last name was Vader, right? Instead of Darth being like Darth Sidious, Darth Vader, and all of the Sith lords, right? They all have this title, Darth. That wasn't the case at A New Hope. In Empire Strikes Back, it was starting to evolve, but that's why you get that little inconsistency, because Darth Vader and Anakin were not originally, and even at the time of that movie, they hadn't, when it started, that wasn't the case in the original script. Of course, we get the scene later. It's coming, right? We know that when the actual script, when the movie was written, that they kind of rewrote that, and they made Darth Vader Luke's father. That happened during the rewrite process as they're developing the storyline. And that's why you get the scene later, and why it's become famous in Star Wars for them to say, well, from a certain point of view. That's just a way to say, well, we changed our minds on the history here, and so we're just going to say, well, if you look at it from this wrong way, you could make the assumption that it's the same guy, but actually it's the same guy. But it's kind of messed up. So again, for people who's talking about consistency between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, that changed between Darth Vader being the guy who killed Luke's father, and Luke's father being Anakin, and Darth Vader and Anakin were not the same person, to, during the writing process, became the same person. And even at that point, when they made the movie, Luke and Leia were still not brother and sister. At the end of the movie, when we see Luke and Leia kind of holding arm in arm, or he's got his arm around her shoulder, they weren't brother and sister at the time when that movie was produced and released. That came later. So that's, again, a retroactive explanation, right? So context, a retroactive context, a retcon. So we get then the scene where, let's see, I'll go back to my notes. Just another note there. My own personal opinion is they should have left it that way. Luke and Leia still shouldn't have been brother-sister. It solves a lot of problems. And even in Return of the Jedi, that didn't have to be the case. He didn't have to tell her that. They could have just had this Force connection. Leia still could have been a Force sensitive. Leia still could have been all these other things. But you could have taken out the scene where he says, do you remember your mother? And all of that, because then when you go back to the prequels and Padme has them and she dies in childbirth, that becomes another problem, because they were twins. They were born there, and of course Obi-Wan takes one and the other goes off with Bail Organa. But you also get the scene in New Hope where, or even here, they say that oh, hi Irish, good to see you on Stories by Irish, good to have you here. So here as well, you get in Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan says to Yoda when Luke left, Well, that's it then. Right? And Yoda says there's another. Well, if you go back to the prequels and you look, Obi-Wan was there. He knew that there were twins, and he had one of them. He knew that there was a sister, and yet in Empire, it's as if he doesn't know that there's a sister. So, oh, Sir Nerd a lot. Good to see you. Good to have you. So, if you just take out Luke and Leia being a sister, you change that one little bit. It doesn't change Empire. It doesn't change Return of the Jedi. It makes the sequels fine. It doesn't do anything with those either. And you actually could have followed up in the sequels with Luke going to find his sister, who is not Leia, right? All of that works really, really well. To me, that's one of the biggest mistakes of Empire, is making them brother sister. Of course, I don't mind the retcon of Vader being his father because of how it plays. It's still a problem, right? But it's still a retcon, but it works. So so let's get back to the note. Oh, so they put Han in carbonite, right? So it's a test of the carbonite. Can we freeze somebody and will he survive? Again, we in the prequels, not the prequels themselves, but in the Clone Wars animated series, they put people in carbonite and they transport them, and that's actually an idea that then Ahsoka uses to get on as well, because they know that it slows their heartbeat and they couldn't be detected as living beings, right? So they purposely, Obi-Wan himself was even put in carbonite to travel. Obi-Wan and Rex and Ahsoka and several stormtroopers were put in carbonite, and they moved them that way. And here in Empire, they're putting Han in carbonite. Now you could say, well, okay, it's a different group of people doing a process that was known, but it's still a little bit of an issue. So I just wanted to bring that up. Every time you go back and do something in a prequel, in movies that happened before, you need to be a little bit careful about what you're talking about on things that are happening now. And of course, George Lucas just plain didn't care. And I say that kind of harshly because you see what he did with the original trilogies and keep making scenes and McClunky and all of that. So he doesn't mind that your memory says one thing and then his movie says something else, and he changes it. So so they put Han in carbonite. Luke's drawn into that same trap, right? So Irish, let's see what you say here. The consistencies. Yeah, yeah, Irish, that's good. Yeah, you know about the consistencies, but your brain just fixes it, right? Your brain just says, oh, okay, this is this. And, or you just plain didn't care, right? So as a kid, when I was 12 years old and I watched Empire, it didn't get me. And same thing when I was a little bit older and saw Return of the Jedi, and you learned that Leia's his sister, I didn't go back and go, ooh, that's kind of gross. Like she was making out with him pretty, like that lip lock she puts on him in Empire is not a small thing, right? It's not like a peck on the cheek. And people say, well, she didn't know. But the thing is, in Return of the Jedi, when he tells her that he's her or she's his sister, she goes, you know, I've always known. Really, you've always known. Back when you were lip locking with him in Empire, you knew. Like, oh, okay, I'll forgive you in A New Hope when you kiss him as he's going across that gorge, right? He's using the rope and he's kind of swinging across there, and she gives him a kiss for good luck. I may forgive you that one, but the lip lock on Empire, if you've always known, you shouldn't be kissing your brother like that. That's not okay. It's not good. So that's it, again, it's solved if she's not his sister. But anyhow, we get then a little bit further. Yeah, so Luke is brought into the same trap, right? They say tested it with Han, the carbonite work, and the plan is to get Luke to fall into that hole, and he's gonna carbonite him. So everybody clears the way, and they kind of, escort Luke that direction, and he takes the bait. is great because in New Hope, of course, you get Akbar with "It's a trap." In a New Hope, in Empire, you get Leia. It's a trap. I think today is the first time I connected those two lines. We know that there's always lines that repeat through the movies, and different characters have them, and you kind of listen for them. This is the "It's a trap" that was in Empire. It was really good, a lot of fun. And then let's see. How does Vader know that Obi-Wan trained Luke? That's the question I asked, because when Vader and Luke start battling, Vader killed Obi-Wan in A New Hope, right? He struck him down and he disappeared. And in fact, uh, Luke went to be with Yoda to be trained. Yoda did the training. Obi-Wan was just kind of a mentor guide of some sort. But Vader says Obi-Wan has trained you well. He must have assumed that the training happened before A New Hope, right? That Luke had been trained for years and years growing up with Obi-Wan. That's how I make that fit in my head. I don't think it's ever explained. But back to what Irish said, you know, you kind of fill these holes in your head, and that's what I did with Vader saying, Obi-Wan has trained you well. And let's see what it says. Vader even says, don't let yourself be destroyed as Obi-Wan was. Right? Vader's assuming Luke raised with Obi-Wan's secret hiding. So then Lando helps everyone escape, tells them to leave. Yes, he has the high ground. It's coming. It's coming. And so there's the scene in there where he says, "Yeah, Obi-Wan has trained you well." Luke is actually, when you see that, Luke is standing up and Vader's down, and you go back to that. I've got the high ground. He says, "Oh, wait a minute. I fought somebody before who was above me." And holding a lightsaber. It didn't work out so well. I lost all my arms and legs. And he says, Obi-Wan has trained you well. You've got the high ground. That was good, Sir Nerd-a-Lot. That's absolutely great. And is it again retroactively and seeing that fits together really well. And it's really, really funny when you make that connection. And it's awesome. It's made for a lot of great memes. His wife. Oh, okay, Irish. Good to have you back. And then, of course, Lando gets him to leave. The big reveal, the thing that happens, and I mentioned this to my daughter earlier today when we were watching it. Right before it happened, I said, "Here comes the most misquoted phrase in all of Star Wars," right? Because people remember it as Luke, I am your father, but the actual line is, "No, I am your father," right? Like Luke tells him, Obi-Wan told me about you. You killed my father. And that's when Vader responds, "No, I am your father." And you get that great scene, and my daughter's shown me, if you ask Alexa, if you tell Alexa, I am your father, she has that same response. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. And my daughter does that from time to time. So she's on here now. I see Music Major made a comment. She said, I mean, they don't often interpret things through the Force. There's that possibility. There are scenes where Rey and Ben can see each other, with them being relatives, maybe. So we're going to get there. That's a good point. I'm going to bring that up here in a second with Luke and Leia as this wraps up. So we get the big reveal. Luke says, "It's impossible," and search your feelings. You know it's true. And then it ends. There's the scene. Luke falls down. He gets caught on the antenna underneath Cloud City, and the lightsaber falls away. And that's the part where people have always asked, well, how did they recover that lightsaber for the sequels? That's been a question for a long time, and it comes up, and I look forward to when we talk at some point about Return of the Jedi. because Luke has a green lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. The blue one's gone, and that green one comes up, and there's a story behind why it's green, not blue. And the reason that's often given is not the real reason. If you haven't looked it up, it's a fun discussion. Uh, so the so Luke is hanging on that antenna underneath Cloud City, and he reaches out to Leia through the Force. And so this is the point my daughter brought up, music major brought up, that perhaps they can sense each other because they're Force sensitive. I think it can happen because they're Force sensitive, not because they're relatives. We see it in the Rise of Skywalker that Finn can sense Rey, and it's because they have that connection. They have a connection together. They're friends. They know each other. There's a strong bond, and Luke can sense Leia because Leia is Force sensitive. She doesn't have to be his sister, and that's again my complaint. Like, even if she's not his sister, he can know that she's Force sensitive, and he could have told her at the end of Return of the Jedi, Leia, you have the same powers I do. You're Force sensitive. I can sense it. It doesn't have to be you're my sister. Like my father had it, I have it, and my sister has it. Like, he doesn't have to do that, right? He can just say, I'm Force sensitive, and I can feel through the Force that you are as well, and they can have this bond one another because of that Force connection. It doesn't have to be stories. Irish. If I remember, Mark Hamill didn't know about Vader being his father, right? Yeah, that's actually true. When the scene was being filmed, he didn't know that yet, and it was something that was added at last second for him to learn. Like, he had to know about it when it actually did happen, but he was still just learning it when it was delivered, and it was powerful. Yeah. So that response that Mark Hamill had in the "I am your father," he was able to respond even stronger because that he was just learning that. Yeah. Ahsoka sensed Anakin's turn. Yeah, there's all kinds of cases. That was a good point too. Don't get me started on Ahsoka. I love Ahsoka. She's my favorite, and the Clone Wars series to me is some of the best Star Wars there is. Period. All the way through. Of course, Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie, and today's the 40th anniversary, and so I won't stray too far. But yeah, Ahsoka can sense Anakin. They've got that connection together, and you know what? They're not brother and sister. How about that? So there's so that's good. At the end, Luke and Leia are aboard the medical ship, and Lando and Chewie are going to find Han. Right. So Han's in carbonite. He's been taken by Boba Fett to go to Jabba, and Boba Fett's going to get the reward for bringing Han Solo in, and so Chewie and Lando are going to go do that, and Luke and Leia are aboard the medical ship, and Luke and Leia are still flirtatious towards each other at the end with Luke's arm around her, and at this point, there's still no evidence of them being written in the story as brother and sister. Maverick Pilgrim, hello, my friend. Good to have you here. It's good to be streaming again. So it's good to be here talking on the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back. So that's my walkthrough of the movie, and kind of bringing up some of the points that I've had as I rewatched it again yet today. Just love that movie. I love Star Wars so much, and that's one of the movies that cemented it for all my entire childhood. I mentioned earlier in the stream, the first time I saw it, I was about 12 years old. I may have been 13. My birthday's at the end of July, and today is the 40th anniversary, and I'm pretty sure Empire was still in its first run in theaters at the end of July. So it could have been 13. I was 12 or 13 when I saw it the first time, and it's one of the movies that cemented Star Wars as an anchor in my life from there on. So at this point, I know there's just a couple people here. I've got a tiny little channel, and we've only got a few people on. is there's anything that you guys like to talk about. Nerd a lot. Put a Boba Fett helmet like the 501st. Love Ahsoka. Oh, that's fantastic. I've got to increase my collection. There are things that I've wanted for years, but Mrs. Claus won't let me buy. So, you guys, if I get some of these things, you may have to keep it secret for me. We'll see. Santa's got his own cabin now, right? So Elle's got me this for social distancing. I can sit out here in my cabin, got the fireplace running. I can sit out here and keep warm and maybe put my Star Wars collection out here, and Mrs. Claus won't even know. That'll be great. So, yeah, Maverick, I'm wearing my Empire Strikes Back shirt today. Hey, good on you. Remembering the Empire Strikes Back today. That's great. So, I think that's about it. We thought that maybe a Magic Maker to join us, but he hasn't made it in today. It's good to finally get back to streaming again. I've got some equipment to help with the streaming to improve the quality, as I had to move away from my desk where I was before, and so now I've got a new home. I'm new online here, and I've got a webcam ordered to upgrade it as well. So maybe we'll get the improvement of the video a little bit better, and the audio video might get better with an improved camera. I've got an older Logitech, and I've ordered a new one. So, Music Major is my daughter. She's also my head elf. Right? She goes by Lolly the elf during Christmas, and Lolly the elf likes to come out to stores to meet kids with me, and she's great working with kids, but she's got to keep a secret, right? She's got to keep a secret. You can't let Mrs. Claus know. And you're right, Mrs. Claus calls this Santa's Nerdcast. She makes fun of Santa for this, but that's okay. I can take it. Yeah, that's good. So with that, you guys, I look forward to getting back on here again soon, and having regular streams where we could talk about Star Wars. We can just enjoy being fans of the franchise, and we could be critical, but we do it in a light spirit. And I've kept on my channel the hashtag about the Gray Order. I try to adhere to those tenets of the Gray Order. I'm still a member of the Gray Order Discord server. And you can find me on the Gray Orders server. You can find me on the Den of Nerds server. I'm also on Reimagining Star Wars with a Magic Maker. And there's a new Discord server out that called FAN. And that FAN was, I'm trying to remember what that stands for. One of you guys probably knows right off the bat. It's, oh shoot, I'm going back to try to find where they said what it stood for. Give me a moment. Let's see if I can get all the way back. And it's got a lot of the folks that are also with the Gray Order. And so we got Mad Max out there, Nerd-A-Lot, you're there, with a bunch of others. Let's see. I can't. You guys are probably going to get FAN before I do. Shoot. Well, it's just taken me too long to get to the top of the stream where they said what the server, what it stood for. So let's see. Welcome to the server. I'm trying to find where they put what it means. Fandom Alliance Network. FAN. Fandom Alliance Network. So you'll find me on that Discord server. I'm on again the Gray Order, and I also follow Hello Greedo and Star Wars Explained. I'm on their Discord servers as well, and I'm a patron of not only the Den of Nerds but also Girls with Sabers. So if you guys find me any of those places, that's where I'm typically participating and interacting with folks. So other than that, we will see you guys tomorrow morning. I'll be on the Fanjectures site and in the morning, and typically on the Den of Nerds, and then 2nd Street Marvel as well. on their streams, at least to say good morning and hello. So with that, we'll say good night. Happy 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, and Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a good day.